Well, that would then want to ask Mayor Kalman in terms of where the detail that we're the major activity center kind of node identified in the big regional map, but you all have put a lot of work into what the detail is and looks like.
Right, with our TOD. And I want to kind of give a little history about what happened. I ran for mayor, and I won. And I see this giant hole in our city. I don't know anything about new urbanism. This is in 2003. But a man, you mentioned his name a couple times, Lee Walker, took me on a little trip to the Kentlands and showed me something I'd never seen before. This is incredible. And what we did is we took this 2,300 acres. It started out as 200, but when the next owner found out, and the next one, and the next one, it grew and grew and grew. Capital Metro was starting the rail initiative. We brought in people from all over the country and Austin to help us plan our city. It was truly a regional effort. To the detail is what we've done there in Leander. So what we've done is we've created a transit-oriented development that is built around the pedestrian. And I've just learned all this in the last 4 years on how to do things. But it is so precisely done. We are so hooked. 40,000 people are going to live in that area. They're going to hop on the train. It's built for one-car families, and they're coming down to Austin. And what we want in Austin is a steel-wheeled solution. That's what the satellite cities all around are going to be calling for. And we are regional partners. And we are going to do everything we can to help with the steel-wheeled solution down in Austin. But Leander started something awesome. And we're very, very proud of that. It's a honored thing for me to be a part of that. I don't know if that answered the question. That's who we are. We're very, very happy.
Great. That's
okay?
Absolutely great. But then you start, but you're highlighting the idea that you bring people in who may have done it before, who are aware of where the devils are, and that's always a funny expression because God is in the details as well as the devil. But to bring people in and you, and I'll ask the judge to comment on that in a second. But and you had it was a public effort as well, multiple landowners, but it's not impossible to kind of assemble the details in those big with a regional scope and an activity center.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're doing is fabulous. The next task is to take that set of standards that you've created and make them normative for all development. I mean, there's no reason you should have one place that's great and walkable, and then the next place, that's back to business as usual, cul-de-sacs and arterials. So, and you know, this often the way it works. You have to go out and build something and get everybody comfortable with it, and then you can change all the regulations so that you can bring that about.
Well, what we've done in Leander, we have our TOD, but we also have what we call the composite zoning. I think you brought that up in your little presentation, Jim. And composite zoning covers our whole city. And that is, I think David Hutton's out in the audience. What was fun with him is we let a planner plan. We let him, I mean, actually at night, he had a little tablet by his bed. And he'd wake up with a brilliant idea, and we let him do that. One thing also that we didn't do, you all mentioned committees. We didn't have a committee.
I mentioned those a lot.
We didn't have a committee in Leander. That's why things got done. And I don't mean to. Well, we didn't. We ran herd, and we created this wow, and literally locked everyone in a room for 7 days and came up with the most magnificent plan this region has ever seen. And now all cities, especially the city of Elgin, are working on these same issues just like we did. Right, Elgin? Elgin.
Elgin in the house. Yeah. So, Judge, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Elgin and Opportunity Bastrop, because that's another one of these efforts that was populist in nature and dealing with trade-offs.
Well, first of all, Elgin in the house, I really appreciate that because part of Bastrop County. I want to look at this in a unique way. A lot of times when we look at progression, we are selfish in our progression. We want to get our nice house and be able to live by ourselves, and we put up boundaries, be it a fence or we want to move out to certain neighborhoods. But what I'm so impressed about in Bastrop County is that people have come together to bring about difference. And the key in doing that is bringing people together to say where we're going to go. As I look at progression, it's always been a division. It's a division of resources, a division of people, and it's not community development. But in Bastrop County, what I've been amazed by with Envision Elgin and Opportunity Bastrop, it's been the goal of saying, let's bring the people together from all different backgrounds to have involvement in where we go. And that is the uniqueness of it, because they're saying no matter where you're from, we're bringing you to be a part of where Bastrop County or where Central Texas goes and where it's going to be our thought pattern. So what has happened in Bastrop County and through Envision Elgin is bringing the citizens in and say, okay, how do you want to see Bastrop County move forward? And what's unique about it is we're a rural county. So we don't have all the resources. We can't say in county government, this is how we're going to do it, because we don't have all the resources. But it's unique when you bring the people in that are traveling into Austin, that has moved in from California, that has been there all their lives, all those different people coming in and saying, guess what? This is how we want to make Bastrop County grow, and we're going to be a part of it. And as government officials, a lot of times, we can get stagnant and say, as you say, it's business as usual. We don't have the tax base. We don't want to raise taxes, all those different things. But it's the difference when you have a group of citizens coming in and saying, guess what? This is where we want Bastrop County to go. The first question as an elected official that we would say is, okay, now where's the resources? We don't have the money. We don't have. But then those same people come in and say, guess what? We're going to go out there and work to find a solution. And not only are we going to work by ourselves, we're going to work with you. We're going to identify a lot of the barriers, and then we're going to come back and say, guess what? We've recognized the barriers, but here are some of the solutions. And how can we work together to achieve those goals? And as an elected official, you say, yeah, that's what I want. That's how we achieve things. We were looking at our first county park. And maybe in Austin or in a lot of large areas, that's easy to do. But in Bastrop County, we don't have the manpower to go out there and do maintenance on the park. So when we brought that up, we were like, park? What is that? We don't have the money for that. That's not a road, because as a commissioner or a county judge, folks, when you're sitting at a restaurant, they're coming and say, wait a minute, I got a hole in my road, are you going to fix it? And you hear that all the time. So when you start talking about a park, that's taking money away from roads. But this community came together and said, hey, we will work with you and we'll find the resources, and we'll form a community organization to do some of these things. So what's unique, I'm getting to your point. So I don't want to take the mic, but this is what I love, because it's opportunity. And they said, we're going to look and find the barriers, but help them find a solution. So how financially can we achieve this? So they went out, and as part of Opportunity Bastrop, not only on this, but every initiative that they come up with, and they came up with over 16 initiatives on how to improve Bastrop County. But part of that plan was the financial piece. So saying we're going to come up with a recommendation, but also we're going to come up with some ideas on how you're going to financially pay for that. And as an elected official, I was like, yeah. So the people are saying they want it, but this is how we're going to finance it. And if we can't finance it now, we're going to finance it down the road. So actually, it's a plan of moving forward. Now, let's say if Judge McDonald is gone or a commissioner is gone, you still have a plan that the people has put together to say this is how we're going to move. So it's not going to be affected by who's in and out of office. The plan is going to dictate how the people in the office move, or who's going to be in office, because it is a plan of the people.
And I so want to believe that. I mean, I really. Well, no, but the populist side of this, that you're staying in touch with the citizens and doing what the citizens want, is the hope, right? It's always the hope every time we do these things. And you mentioned the 1,000 Friends of Oregon in Portland and how they kind of reacted to something and they came up with a solution. And certainly, Judge, that's what your citizens have done. But the question, the challenge, and this is a deep challenge for Envision Central Texas, is a deep challenge as we've been talking about rail in this community for at least 8 years, if not 10 years, and will be, is how do you shepherd the idea, you know, the vision, the idea, the opportunity, to the realization of it, to the builtness of it, right? Because you run into money pretty quick. You run into constantly and appropriately other values and perspectives as the table gets wider. Nothing's perfect, as you mentioned, but how do you stay perfect enough that you're achieving what the hopes and dreams were of the idea in the first place? Because it is populace driven. It's what you hope for.
Can I say this?
That's why you're up here.
I grew up, and people are gonna always get on me because I bring up Texas A&M all the time. But I grew up as a small country boy from Bastrop. Parents didn't go to Texas A&M and didn't even go to college. I had some Aggies come to me and say, hey, I want you to go to Texas A&M. I'm gonna help you find the funding. I went in and I became brainwashed. And y'all Aggies, y'all know what I mean about being brainwashed. We are the Aggies are we. But the thing was, I had an opportunity to go to Texas A&M and become part of a system that went out and changed the world. But I was able to become part of that system and get those resources that I was denied through our education to provide opportunity. What am I saying? As elected officials, as individuals of influence, and everyone here has that opportunity, we have to be able to provide resources that change people's lives. And how do you provide resources that change people's lives? It's through exposure. By being exposed to that brainwashing, I was exposed to future businessmen, businesswomen, people that were going to go out and be able to change societies, and it made me better. How does this go into what we're talking about? When we're talking about connectivity, a lot of times we're thinking about roads. We're thinking about parks. I'm talking about people. And if we can use the tools that we have to connect people, then we really bring about a change. What am I saying? That means a family that maybe has never had anyone go to college is now connected with a community where you have doctors, lawyers, and businessmen. So they have resources there. They have the opportunity to interact with those individuals. And we do that through light rail. We do that through roads. We do that through communities. Bringing people of different backgrounds together in one community where they can benefit from the resources that are there. If I can benefit
Mark
from...
the tape. Mark the tape. We want to replay that again.
No,
it's a great.
Let me finish this. No, I do, because I think a lot of times when we start planning, we get it so, oh, but we forget about a lot of times is how does it affect people's lives? And as a county judge or a public servant, if I can get someone less fortunate connected to opportunities, be it education, be it people, be it just resources, then I'm doing something. And that's what we're talking about, this planning. We're talking about affecting people's lives. I was doing a budget one time, and I got so caught up on the numbers, I was like, okay, we got to cut this, we got to cut this, we got to cut that. But right outside of my office, it was some individuals that were coming to get benefits. And at that time, I was looking at those individuals, and every time I saw a face that I recognized. That's so-and-so, that's so-and-so, that's so-and-so. So that budget moved away from just being paper to being lives. So when we start talking about these plans for the future, I want to be able to say, through Opportunity Bastrop, through Envision Central Texas, that we were able to affect people's lives by giving them more opportunity. So in Bastrop County, if we can give individuals more opportunity by closing the gap, by saying that is no longer the fenced-in neighborhood where all the rich people live, and this is the other side of the tracks with low-income housing, and people don't want to develop. But if I could pull those resources together and say, guess what? We're going to bring all that together in one neighborhood and have true connectivity based on people's lives. And we do that if we look at our positions. If I can say, now how can I use the resources that I have, tax dollars, infrastructure, all those things, to connect people? then I can say, you know, I didn't just build a highway. I just didn't build a building. I built a bridge that connected people from so many backgrounds where they can grow. I learned a lot of things at Texas A&M that I wouldn't have learned in Bastrop, Texas. But when I learn those things, I come back and say, I'm going to bring it back to Bastrop County or to the individuals who need it. Now I'm finished and I'm off my soapbox.
Oh, that's
Good job.
it's great. I think that was a compliment there. Hey,
Yeah.
Peter or John, you want to
Well-
also talk about that?
Well, in
And then
Leander,
we'll get to a question.
what we've done is we've created a landing zone, and we decided at our moment that we were not going to subscribe to the soft bigotry of low expectations. We were going for it, and we are a quality of life city, as is our region. What has happened in the last 4 or 5 years, I believe our region has matured like none other. We're growing up, and with the initiation of rail this fall, first leg of it, and I'm sure it will be many more. We are coming into our own, and we're going to be a great region here. One thing Leander does is we always say Cabela's is here. Well, it's in our region. It's actually down in Buda, but it's here in our region, and that's the way we're all starting to think. I know that I can call Tom Yantis in Georgetown if I have a question or if I need some answers from him, or I can call my good friend here, and he and I are going to do something. We've already said, remember we said that now twice. Now we're
Going to Cabela's.
yeah, we're going to do something, right? But we're going to do something because we work together. But back to the committee thing, that is why Leander became a success. Is we did not burden the process with a whole bunch of committees. And I'm going to kind of go out on a limb and look at Saltillo Plaza, or Plaza Saltillo here in Austin. I know when I got on the board, and I'm a proud serving member on the board of Capital Metro, when I got on the board of Capital Metro, that was the hot topic. It's the same discussions today that they had 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm not knocking it. When it happens, it's going to be great. But when? I mean, we got all these committees and neighborhoods and all these things. Somebody just needs to say, hey, we're going to do it. We're going to get busy and take no prisoners and do it. And that's the way we did in Leander, and that's why Leander is a success. We brought in, or we are bringing in, big education, big medical, and big transportation. And we did it because we created the environment. We created the environment for success. The market is driving what we're doing, and we're just complementing that. Here they come. Our arms are open. And in closing, all roads do lead to Leander.
But and Peter, so in your travels around other regions and other, how are these themes of kind of really being about the people at the end of the day, behind all the maps and all the charts
And the bar charts.
and all the bar charts? There's people behind those, and that it's building.
Sure. I mean, you know, the reality is that I think one of the debates we're about to have in the new urbanism is to not get single tracked. There's a huge emphasis now on carbon and global warming. And there's no question it's absolutely central to the future of the globe. And what's strangely wonderful about it is that it unifies everybody across the globe. First time there's really something that everybody sees a common destiny and a common set of linkages, connections. So the connections happen at many, many scales, but if you become a specialist and you only focus on one dimension of the problem, you begin thinking about the environmental or the transit, and you forget about the economic opportunity and the question of isolation and segregation in our communities, or affordable housing. If you stop thinking about all the dimensions, you're bound to get it wrong. That's my theory. And so you always have to think of all these dimensions simultaneously. So there is a common thread there. When we were working in Louisiana recently, our work was not to go into the neighborhoods and deal with what people's immediate trauma was, which was no home, no neighborhood, no place to be. But we wanted to ask the bigger questions, which is what's the future of the Delta, and what's the future of the economy, and what's the future of the communities here. And we were quite frightened that people wouldn't rise to it because they're so beat down by the momentary crisis. It's way beyond momentary. And yet, it was astounding, and Robin Rather, who's sitting in the front row there, helped organize all these. The turnout was incredible, and people sat down to work at the large-scale vision. What is their common ground? Their culture and their environment. And saving restoring the Delta became one of the themes of the whole thing. And at the same time that people were still struggling to restore their neighborhoods, they simultaneously could be thinking about restoring the Delta because they saw the relatedness. And that's the same thing that the whole system's thinking that always has to happen. People need to think about their neighborhood, their city, their project, but they also need to think about the larger context because that's what creates the real connections, the powerful connections that make things happen in a big way. And so it's quite exciting to hear what you guys are doing. It's a long road. Boy, it seems to be a longer road than I expected to get there in many ways. But I think everybody's coming to their senses. But we have to avoid the tendency to become a series of a coalition of special interests. I'm for affordable housing. I'm for transit. I'm for the aquifer. I'm for this. I'm for the environment. You know, that kind of stuff. Because you never get anywhere as long as everybody camps out in those domains.
Well, we're for progress, and that is a component. All those things you mentioned, they're components under the umbrella of progress. And that's what we're doing up in the inner. I think Bastrop and Elgin and Lockhart, and we're all working like that together. That's why we're maturing, as I said.
We'll look for a question from the audience, but it seems like right before Paul, that if we reframed it rather than trade-offs of having different issue areas, whether it's affordable housing and parking and all that fighting, don't we have to reframe it away from trade-offs and into optimizing across those, so that you would have the idea of different scales at which you're working across, so that whether it's impervious cover and density and all these things, so that there's an idea of that it all can be accommodated if we look at the scenarios about what the proper balance is and where we optimize across those and not have to sacrifice one in order to get another.
My theory is if you're not solving 4 problems simultaneously, you're not doing a good design.
So you can't call it a
Maybe
plaza,
5.
and you can't do less than 5 at once. Okay, there we go. Paul, maybe we'll come over here.
Mr. Calthorpe, at the beginning of your speech, you said about growth, get ready, it's going to happen. The question is how it's going to happen. Most of the growth happening in our region is coming because of immigration. Of in-migration. It's not coming because of natural birth rates. Consequently, this growth is encouraged and superinflated by our Chamber of Commerce, who has opened our doors without our input. I understand where you're coming from. Personally, I think you're brilliant. Personally, I think that this conference is effective in many positive ways. But an overarching theme of Austin's growth and the growth in so many other places is who profits from it, and how do we control, the citizens control, who profits from it. Right now,
So the question there is
it's a question and a statement. It's basically saying that right now citizens don't have a say in development, only in where and how the development is shaped.
All right, there are 2 questions there. And, as much as I like to design to 5 issues, I can only think of 1 question at a time typically. But, it's a deep philosophical issue. If you want to live in a place where the raison d'etre is a wall that's keeping people out, that's a completely different philosophy than I have personally, and I'm never going to advocate such a thing. And also, I think the premise of this country, which was to be open and fluid and to allow people from all over the globe to come and prosper. And if you want to change that, that's a deep philosophical debate that you can't handle in this. But I just basically believe that's a terrible notion. The question of where profits go is actually a very good one. And I think it's, most people, the stereotype is that the developers always make a whole lot of money and everybody gets screwed in the process. The reality is really quite much more complex. But the public sector could be a lot smarter about its handling of land use in terms of money. You know, a coherent regional plan that says this is where development is and this is where it isn't basically takes the land speculators out of the game. And there's a huge amount of land costs that gets driven by speculators who say, okay, I'm going to buy that farmland and because I know these council members, I'm going to get it upzoned, and he gets a windfall. That windfall, creating value through zoning, the value of that ought to be captured by the public sector. And with that value, it could actually pay for a lot of the infrastructure that it lets go. So there's several tiers to the profiteering. Typically, the guy who builds the buildings actually doesn't get to play in that game. It's the land speculators that do. And if you have a more definitive, less laissez-faire, I mean, you know, this is where we get into this rub, because everybody says, well, you want to be top-down planning, you want to do regional plans, you want to tie the hands of local communities, da-da-da-da-da. But if you don't do that, effectively what happens is the land speculators game it and walk away with huge profits that they shouldn't, that should be used to pay for public infrastructure.
And then the challenge in Texas becomes, and Judge, you certainly, is how much ability you have to talk about the land in the unincorporated parts of the county and shape it to even determine your own destiny.
Right. I mean, when you look at it, people have always said plan, but there's not a lot of authority right now that exists in the county to dictate where growth goes. But I think through planning efforts and getting people involved, it's almost like supply and demand. People are saying, I want to see this type of development, and I'm willing to pay this money if these resources are here. So I think when it comes to dictating what type of developments we see, it's going to be what the people are asking for. And I think if we do the planning two-part, I think the people control the government as far as what are going to be the issues, how do we want things to go. And then once that's there, then they work with the developers to say what type of development we want to see in the areas.
And I think I would agree that we need to maybe change some of the weighting about how we're growing and to what end. And a lot of the families that have been moving here in the last decade are starting to have kids here. And the elementary school population in Bastrop or Leander, Hayes, Consolidated, and Austin is showing a different, the components of growth are shifting into a natural increase. Go ahead, question over here.
Yeah, for Peter. One of the infill strategies that we have here in Austin is transit corridors along our arterials. You can imagine an arterial starting in downtown and moving 10 miles out into the countryside. And I've seen two different models for transit corridors in the literature. One is sort of a node-based corridor where you have town centers at key intersections and you have your residential mixed use concentrated there at transit stations, high walkability within that neighborhood, and then you have commercial between the nodes, and that might be running along the corridor for a couple of miles. And then you also have what I'd call continuous mixed use, residential mixed use along the corridor. And I was wondering, for a given arterial, for a given corridor, along that, you know, keeping in mind the different transect zones, what advantages and disadvantages do you see of those two different models of a transit corridor?
I'd vote for both. I don't know why you choose between them. I mean, the nodes are a real thing. The retail in this day and age, I mean, we have to deal with the environment that we're in, happens in discrete increments. It's almost like quantum theory in physics. You know, there's a separation between one scale of retail and the next, and they need catchment areas. So it's highly dependent on the overall density around the corridor. But there is a reality of the node, and then there can be, if there's a high enough density throughout the corridor, there can be mixed use all along the way. As a matter of fact, mixed use at a minimum live work makes the most sense if you want to front onto those environments, because it is tough to have a living room at the ground floor on a major boulevard or an arterial. So I think the answer is both of the above. And the mix and the frequency is a product of the nature of the corridor.
What would be an example of different kinds of corridors, and different mixes that you might have?
Well, I don't know that I can get into that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a,
I'm
I
sorry,
mean, in
maybe
some
we-
a
way,
whole nother session.
well, a
but-
good example of a node, hopefully, will be the triangle. That's a node on an arterial.
Well, and since we're talking about scales here as well, there's I mean, there are corridors. 290 is a major corridor into Bastrop. The river is a corridor unto itself, and I know, Mayor, you have 183 as a corridor, and you're going to have a rail corridor. How are you all looking at the kind of continuity of development along those?
Well, on 183, it's the 6 Ps or 5 Ps, whatever. We have planned through our comprehensive plan there at the city on how to develop our deal. Also, what we've done is we're working with TxDOT to make Leander, 183 through Leander, we're changing it from a highway down to a boulevard, and then back to a highway. We went to the Congress of New Urbanism's symposium in Chicago and learned about this, and we're working with TxDOT now to make that a test case for the state. But we're just planning it properly. And in regard to the market, someone brought up the market or the people making profit, it is all negotiation, man. When they come into our city, we hit them hard. If you want to be in here, this is what you have to do. We're going to parkland, tree. We have working on a tree bank now. We're working on. It hurts, but the value is created, and that's what drives America. We create value, and that's what brings those developers. And also, what we did is we slowed development down to stop the sprawl in 2003 because it was happening all over. In fact, we had 10,000 lots, and we stopped it. We made it very painful for a lot of people. But now, what has happened is that land that was worth $12,000 is now worth $120. We created value, and so all of a sudden, these people.
That's right. The public sector creates value through zoning and infrastructure, and it ought to recapture its fair share. And not so much that it kills the development, but there's value. You know, I forgot to mention one thing in my talk, and there is an 800-pound gorilla here in your town, and it is that new toll road 130. If that gets away, and it is being built, and if the land use around it in that corridor is not brought and tamed and oriented towards the extraordinary potential that the MoCan rail corridor could marry it to. In other words, you could have transit in the same corridor that you've got a new freeway that's actually a fairly good thing to create a great set of transit-oriented developments. If you fail to put in place the land use policies, if you fail to put in place the transit, you're going to get sprawl in that corridor that will, I think, destroy a lot of the rest of the quality of a lot of the rest of this community at large. And so that's a big issue that needs to be grappled with, and I don't hear people talking about it enough.
I think in a lot of the committees I go to, as well as the non-committee meetings, the secret ones, there's a lot of people talking about, and worried about 130 and how we deal with that. I mean, they're worried about that in Bastrop. It doesn't even run into Bastrop, but it's going to ripple east and have an effect there. And the MoCan corridor runs all the way up into Elgin, and so it's not for lack of people talking and worrying about it. I mean, you guys, Judge and Mayor, jump in here. It's the tools and resources to how do you get out in front of it.
Right, and I think that's when you really recognize communities like Elgin when they're bringing the citizens together and they're talking about rail and the opportunities that are there. In the past, a community would say, well, that's beyond our resources, but they're looking at how they can plan for the future, how they can seize the opportunity that 130 would bring to the area just by being on the edges, and say, how can we plan for that? And not only is that going to help Elgin, but it's going to help Bastrop as a county as we continue to try to bring connectivity in that area.
it's gonna breed sprawl if there's not a coherent plan. And the problem that I understand is that you've got various jurisdictions up there that don't wanna work together. to
Well, but
set
we
some real
are working
serious
together, though.
standards.
This region is working together, and one thing that I learned, I was trying to bring a reliever airport to the Leander area, and there is a vehicle called the Joint Airport Zoning Board. So you zone properly around the airport, so there's no, it's between the county and the jurisdictions that are there. So I said, well, why can't 130 create a joint 130 zoning board and just plan that properly? I don't understand what the problem is.
The problem is local jurisdictions never want to give up land use control to any larger entity.
Well,
This is endemic across this country, and you know, the places that don't come to grips with that are going to suffer, and the places that do will thrive. And I'm just laying that out as a big challenge to this community right now. Is you either get your arms around that and control that, or I think a lot of the good things will look, in hindsight, anecdotal.
well, put me on it. I'll have it resolved in a week.
Okay,
You know?
you're on.
I will. I'll
Mark
get
the
on
tape.
That. Yeah.
Again.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad we solved that.
Yeah.
So-
I thought that was a big problem.
That
Well,
was-
shall we go on to the war in Iraq? And maybe
We got 10 minutes. We could do that in 8 minutes, actually, couldn't we?
God.
So the last question I'll hit you guys with is something that ECT hits a lot, gets a lot, and we hear a lot is, and the things in the CNU conference, you go around and you look at the different thoughts about how to build new development, where it should go, what it should be, and what we hear a lot is, well, how do we preserve the character of our community, what it's been for the last 100 years, and how do we be what makes this place unique, and what makes it worth being here, and what makes it special, and it's different in different communities, and especially your animations, Peter, of what something looked like, and it may not be a lovely place, but it's someone's place, and as that place evolves, the rest of the match between, and you even called it out, it's conservation and preservation, but it's how do you derive the economic benefits, but still preserve the uniqueness and the features, whether it's Barton Springs or the courthouse or whatever. What do you all, I know you all have talked about that a lot, but give us some hope that can be done.
Well, if
Just
I may,
say
one
yes.
thing. Well, no.
Just say
Let me
yes.
ask then. You remember with Jim? If you were here,
That is
I've
too
been here
leading a
since-
question.
Is it
That's
too
too, yeah.
Hey,
it's way too-
I've been here since I was a little boy.
How do we do it?
Let me ask. They tore down the armadillo. Remember that? They tore that
Not
down.
personally, I don't, but.
Okay. Well, they tore down the armadillo. That was the end of music in Austin. Is music still here? Yeah. It's the live music capital of the world. It wasn't the end of the world. Things changed, and we embrace change, and that is what makes Austin great. That's Judge. Take it from
And what makes a community special are the residents and the people, and making sure that as you grow and you progress that they're involved in that. I mean, one of the things that I love about Bastrop County is that small town atmosphere, and whoever moves into Bastrop County, they get involved with the community parades and all those different things, and they join different groups, but everyone that they are associated with are proponents of community. They're talking about community, and I think that has to go into your government. One thing that we've done in Bastrop County is that the city, the schools, and everyone, we meet once a month just to talk about what's going on in the area and how we can work together to plan for our future, to make sure when a development comes in, it may be outside of the city's ETJ, it may be in the county, but we've already had conversations with those different entities to say, what is your goal? And then therefore when we're working, we can bring those things together. And that goes with that planning effort, but also with that community effort to be able to focus on what makes Bastrop County special, rather than a lot of times we're always going and saying, what are they doing? What are they doing? And we're trying to bring their specialness or their uniqueness to us, but we have to figure out as a community what makes us unique and how we're going to market that to Central Texas and be able to say, okay, when you think about Bastrop, what do you think about? And as a community, we'll be able to push those things. And the important thing is that it's developed by the community. So when I'm in government, it doesn't become, well, what do I want? It's what do the people want? And you go back once a month and you talk about those goals, you talk about those aspirations, and as government officials, we hold true to those. And are these concluding statements?
Just so that we honor the time commitment, I know there's more people lined up for questions. I'll volunteer all three of these guys to stay up here and answer your questions after we conclude, but let's do concluding comments so that we can end on time.
Concluding comments?
Yeah, you can say anything you want.
Okay. When I arrived in Leander, there were two factions, and whatever position this one took exactly the opposite.
I'm aware
Let's
of this.
fight. Let's fight because that's our culture. Let's do it because that's. I came in, I didn't understand this, and what I did is I put them together, kind of put them in a room, and said, "Go kill each other, or let's work together." That's what we did in Leander. That is happening all over the region, especially in the smaller cities. Austin still has that mentality, I think. Is, you know what? Let's fight. Let's fight because that's what we do. Well, we're done with that.
So from the front
Listen,
row,
I love
we
Capital
are the
City, Miss
world.
Rather, and I do. Capital City is the centerpiece of this region, and we do love it. But it's time to start doing instead of saying. And that's what we're doing in the North region, I believe, over in the Bastrop area and Elgin and Lockhart and all that. We're starting to do, and hopefully changing the way we all think. We're growing, but we're done with fighting. We want to start doing. That's my closing statement.
Okay, calling out Austin to get on with doing.
Bastrop County is a rural area. We have plenty of challenges, but I've been amazed on how as a community we've come together to face those challenges and are working to say, okay, these are some of the things that we can do as a community. I say things are solved very easily, and I love to end with this because I see it all the time. It hit me one morning. And some of y'all may have heard this, but I'm going to conclude with it again. A lot of things can be solved in the morning. And I want you to all envision this. It's early morning, you're waking up, and you're getting ready to have breakfast. Now, you have your bowl, and you have your cereal. You pour the milk into the bowl, and the milk is common, just every day. It's white. There's nothing special about it.
2%.
2% if you want 2%.
Right.
And I've looked at it because this was a unique morning for me because I thought about generations. And my grandfather's favorite cereal was cornflakes, kind of laid out. You knew what to expect. My father's favorite cereal was Frosted Flakes, a little added sugar, a little bit better. But I started thinking about the generation that we're in. And I said, guess what? We're not the cornflake, we're not the Frosted Flakes, but we're the Fruit Loops. And I poured my Fruit Loops into the bowl. And I looked at those Fruit Loops, and I got real deep at this time. and I looked at the Fruit Loops, and I said, man, look at these Fruit Loops. Look at all these different colors. Some of the Fruit Loops were even the same color, but there was a little dot or indentation that made them different. And I sat there, and I was eating my cereal. Then I was getting to my favorite part of the meal, drinking the milk. But then I looked at that milk. That milk was no longer one color. It was an accumulation of colors coming together to make that milk just a little bit sweeter. And I thought about it. I said, when we think about growth and we think about development, we're kind of like those Fruit Loops. Now, some of us are common, but there's a little dot or indentation that makes us different. But when we come together and we contribute to the whole being the milk, the whole being the purpose, at the end of the day, if we give what we're supposed to give, that milk is just a little bit sweeter. And one thing that you'll realize about Fruit Loops, they're well-rounded, knowing where they come from, have an identity, but they never float to the bottom. So here we are, Central Texas, Bastrop, Caldwell, Hayes, Williamson, all the cities in between, but we all have a common goal or purpose to make this area better.
That's right.
And to make it better, we're all going to have to give to it, knowing who we are, knowing what we're about, but giving to the whole. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a little bit sweeter. And that's the goal, to be a Fruit Loop generation.
I'm going to leave it at that.
Oh, come on.
No, mainly
You don't got a
because
multi-meal
no, the
reference,
problem
or-
is I did not have breakfast this morning, and I'm really hungry. that made it worse. So I'm gonna go find myself in Fruit Loops right now.
So on that note, well, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Mayor. Some great sound bites to walk away with, some great principles to think of. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to seeing you, and have a great conference.